Tanvi, let me start by giving you a perspective. Whenever a government in any democracy tries to undertake reform of a fundamental and transformational nature, there will be resistance. This is the history of reform. I can tell you in the Indian context, right from the time that the social reform took place hundreds of years ago. And in the case of agriculture, the situation is just that much more complicated. Just to provide you some perspective, in the year 1950, agriculture accounted for 50% of India's GDP. That figure now is down to 15.69%. 65% of India live in what could be described as rural or semi-rural areas, and 42% of our workforce comes from agriculture, and yet its contribution to GDP is only 15.69%. And agriculture, in spite of increases in government spending, the budget has gone up 6 times in the last 5 years. Our crop insurance expenditure has soared, but there is still 30% wastage on account of a lack of infrastructure. Many of the reforms that the Prime Minister has now succeeded in introducing were being demanded by the opposition, particularly the Congress party, in the year of the Lord 2008. Then they were saying, why should farmers be constricted? Why must they sell only to mandis? And they should be allowed to sell to the private sector. Now, the peculiar situation that has developed is farmers have got used to the MSP, and they are saying that the MSP should be made compulsory. There was an apprehension that the MSP and the mandis would be done away with. We have given assurances at the highest level. The Prime Minister has personally reached out, spoken from the heart, that mandis will stay, MSP will stay. So it is an apprehension that the farmers have, fueled by some vested interests who say that, MSP will finally go away. The government is willing to talk. You talked about the government's latest offer and the farmers still showing reluctance. I have a slightly different perspective, Tanvi. I think the farmers are beginning to realize, they are talking amongst themselves. It's always very difficult for a government to negotiate with 30 or 40 different groups. You certainly can't negotiate with 42,000 farmers on tractors. Look, we're a democracy. The right to protest is part of our ethos. It's allowed under our constitution. But even protest has to be done in a way, and any problem, no matter how serious it is, you can always find a solution, and the government is committed to finding the solution. And I'm sure that the farmers, who are a very productive segment of our society, will sit down with the government and we will find a way forward.
Right, sir. But on the subject of specifics, essentially, how does the government plan to win the support of the farmers, especially on the MSP issue? Because it seems like for now, the farmers are seeking complete repeal of the bills.
Well, I'll tell you, the issue started with the people who have an interest in agriculture and who represent agricultural constituencies asking for an assurance that MSP would be provided. And during the session of Parliament last year, even though Parliament was in session, a statement was made at the level of the Prime Minister that MSPs are here to stay. That procurement will take place through MSP. Now, let me give you a very interesting figure. The procurement started this year in Punjab 9 days prior to the procurement season commencing. The procurement was 20% of paddy, was 20% over the target. It was 25% over last year. So, you have an assurance from the government that MSP is here to stay, but more important, you have the practical demonstrated procurement which took place, and it is 25% higher. And look, the prices, the quantum. So I think on that, anyone who says that the government is not serious needs to really relook at the fact. But I think the message is beginning to seep home, and I think very soon, when the talks take place, any residual doubts that there may still exist will soon evaporate, and we'll be able to talk and find a resolution to this farm issue.
Right. I believe on part of the farmers, sir, the concern is really, especially among wheat and rice farmers, the concern is that, losing APMCs, losing the middlemen would essentially mean losing their bargaining power over the price discovery mechanism of the grains. Is that a fair concern?
Well, I can share with you that any well-meaning, well-intentioned and person who understands the whole thing, their objective should be to get the benefit of farm produce into the pockets of the farmers. You talked about the interest of the middlemen. Well, you know, it's not that the that class is being eliminated, but surely you cannot justify policy in terms of a direction where the interests of the middlemen take precedence over that. In Punjab, for instance, if you take the mandi tax, you take the other thing. Look, I can tell you just as a as a ready reckoner, I read a report in the Tribune dated 2008 where the farmers' unions are actually appealing to the government to ask for the options for the farmers to increase, that they should be allowed to sell to the private sector, etc. Now, unless you are able to eliminate wastage and unless you are in a position to eliminate what I call unreasonable middleman thing. Now, I am absolutely no doubt that the farmer, those who actually undertake the farming activity, they are interested in more money going into their own pockets. And a number of schemes that the Prime Minister has introduced, 6,000 rupees in every farmer's pocket every few months. Crop insurance has gone up to 97,000 crores. We have increased the budget 6 times. It's now 134,000 crores. So the governmental effort is to ensure that the farmer benefits and all other vested interests, just their position is circumscribed in the overall interest of Indian agriculture. I mean, Indian agriculture is declining. How can you have a situation where there is 30% wastage? Farmers, the rate of growth is only stagnant around 2%. Every other sector of the economy does well except the farming community in spite of all these dispensations. I think that is a challenge, and the Prime Minister has been able to, he has the political bandwidth, he has a commitment, and he has the ability to push the reform through.
As I'm given to understand, sir, food is largely a state subject in India, and states exercise tremendous influence on food supply chains. So can the centre leave the enforcement of these bills to the states, each state for itself?
Well, there are different combinations. I don't want to be sitting, thanks to your hospitality, and speculating on what precisely the way forward is, how much of flexibility. Let me just say, food security we have, states play an important role. But you need to introspect and ask yourself a simple question. Look, I'm a very proud Punjabi and a very proud Sikh, and I don't think this is a Punjab-specific problem only. But why is there more of an agitational streak in Punjab and Haryana? I mean, farmers throughout the country are there. I think we need to reach out to the Punjab farmers. We need to reach out to the heart and have a heart-to-heart. I've been doing that on a non-stop basis in the last few days. And I'm very confident that the Punjabi, the Sikh farmer is very nationalistic, very much a hard-working, pragmatic person. And I'm sure they will realize that these reforms have been brought precisely for them. And we are willing to talk on the rest. Look, we have informal channels open with those in government in Punjab and elsewhere. And the messages I get are all very clear. Look, all of their demands have been met. You now need to put something together by way of a ribbon. They don't use the word face saving. Let me stick my neck out and use it on your channel. But we will have a solution soon.
Okay. Now, most economists and investors that I've spoken to unanimously believe that these reforms are much needed for the Indian agricultural sector. They are a step in the right direction. I think the feedback also includes the fact that the rollout of the bills could have been communicated better with proper consultation. And so what is your view on that front?
Well, madam, I can tell you, this is not a new proposal. These reforms or these demands for reform have been on the anvil for 20 years. I have cited a 2008 Tribune report. I can go much further. I can document that. To say that the things could have had more consultation, we've had consultation at every level. I was in Parliament when the bills were passed. A simple question that I want to address, I mean, your channel may not be the right place, but if you were opposed to the bills, you should have been in Parliament. You should have been there in numbers. And in the Rajya Sabha, you should have sat on your seat and pressed the division bell and asked for a division. But instead, they were short of numbers Because they were short in numbers, they went into the well of the house and snatched the presiding officer's mic. So I think a false narrative has been created, which now is no longer credible. And I like the fact that you draw attention to the fact that most economists, not most, all economists, Dr. Montek Ahluwalia headed a task force. He made the same recommendations. The Congress party has all this in their manifesto. Look, everyone who has even a nodding acquaintance with agriculture agrees to the need for reform. And this is that reform. As I said, if there was little less prachar or you want a little more now, the Prime Minister has reached out to them, and these efforts will continue. I'm speaking to you, and I hope the message goes across to countries. I was a little amused the other day. There were some parts of the world which are in the WTO or erstwhile GATT's grouping called the Cairns Group. These are countries which have always opposed India's MSP and food stockpiling. They are now making statements. I wish they were a little more consistent and change their view when it comes to India's agricultural policies in the multilateral forum. So there are a lot of people speaking. It's not about protest. We are quite happy with protest. But you know, there is a method to protest. But look, we are confident of being able to resolve this issue. Many people are talking to us, talking to the concerned ministers, etc. And it's only a matter of time in the next few days that I think it all begins to fall into place.
Okay, sir, and I'll come to that in just a bit. I just want one more specific from you, and I don't know whether the numbers are out on that front, but I was reading reports indicating that these protests have been able to disrupt food and non-food supply chains, especially in northern India. What kind of impact can these protests have on agri output for the quarter?
First of all, the impact, adverse impact, has been calculated by different people at different levels. I've seen a figure 3,500 crores a day. This impacts not only agriculture but also other allied areas, and certainly there is a damage, and believe me, there is a backlash to that, and there is a hardening of opinion. So I think everybody understands this, and I think they will have to make the effort to ensure that this kind of concomitant damage or you know, which may be unintended, I don't know, I can't peep into their minds, but we have to get on. And after the COVID, when the economy is slowly coming back to pre-COVID levels, there's a revival of demand, production, etc. We shouldn't allow this to continue indefinitely to provide a further setback to our revival efforts.
Right, and since you alluded to this in the interview a couple of times, I do want to get a timeline from you on when can we expect a complete resolution on this matter?
Well, look, there are a number of issues involved to get a resolution. One is a certain open-hearted, with our arms stretched out message from the highest levels. The Prime Minister spoke from his heart on all the issues. You know, this is an agitation not about demanding something. This is an agitation about apprehending that somehow MSP will go away. We can only assure it will not go away. Mandis will stay. Then there was this apprehension that, dispute resolution will become complicated. We had to point out to them that, look, this SDM dispute resolution is quick. It happened 3 days. But if you want to go to the civil courts, by all means do so. Also, that the private sector would take their land away. Look, we have specific safeguards which say the private sector cannot take or usurp the land of the farmer. So on our side, we will do this. We will reach out. But also, I think those who are opinion makers, the press, the economists, I think they all realize the need for reform. I think now it's a question of, in Punjabi, they're saying zid pakarna. I don't know how much of Punjabi you remember, but I think we should now get off the, this my way or the highway approach and sit down. And the government is absolutely sincere. It's ready. If anybody wants some other tweaking, the people are willing to sit down and talk.
Right. And finally, on this issue, sir, it's very important that I get your perspective here and your message to the international community that's watching this story very closely, because the protests have drummed up global support that's coming in for farmers in India. So what is your message going out to the international community?
My message to the international community, which has, I've spent 40 years in a profession when I was with the, Indian origin people or diaspora, if you want to choose that word. I can understand them feeling a certain degree of empathy, but they should also try to understand that what is being done is in the interest of the farming community, that it is in the interest of those who actually till the soil, that those who have given their blood, sweat and tears to making Punjab and Indian agriculture what it is. These are the people who contributed to the Green Revolution. And you don't do that by contributing to a false narrative or fueling something which is not in the interest of Punjab. And I think that message will slowly go home. And there are some elements, and I don't want to get into that. I don't like to brand people. This is about farmers. It is not about other agendas. Those other agendas, a democracy like India can always take within its fold and reconcile dissenting opinion. But our foremost duty must be to do what is in the interest of Indian farmers. And the Indian farmer deserves a better deal. The Punjab farmer deserves to be outside the clutches of vested interest. The Indian farmer needs to be able to do in India what he or she may want to do in other parts of the world, like on the west coast of the United States, etc. And I think you can convert Punjab into that. All it requires is focused and determined attention and effort.
Right, and I appreciate your time, the time that you've given us this morning. Minister, I just want to get in two more questions. One on Air India's divestment, since you look at civil aviation in India. I believe the date for qualified bidders has been extended to Jan 5th. We are given to understand that many bidders have evinced interest in the divestment program, including Tata Sons. And so where does the story stand on that front, and when can we expect the process to get completed?
Tanvi, Air India privatization program is on track. There has been no extension of the date. Those who were having an interest and those who wanted to file an expression of interest were given a timeline. They have all submitted expressions of interest. The concerned government department, DIPAM, under the Ministry of Finance, will by the 5th of January be able to shortlist all the bidders who have qualified. I would not like to speculate on who all have bid, but I can draw your attention to a statement which was made by the concerned government department that that they have received multiple bids. Now, the term multiple means that there are several, and I'm sure the list will be made known on the 5th or 6th of January, which is the normal process. After that, the qualified shortlisted bidders will have a period of 90 days to look at the records on the virtually and come back with question. The 90-day period would obviously take till 31st March, but I've seen a statement by DIPAM which says it may take slightly longer because if there are questions, etc. So I think very soon in the new year you will have this process reaching maturity and finalization, and we are hoping that the successful bidders, successful short-listed people, when they'll submit their financial bid after the 90-day period, after they have had a chance to study the records. And fingers crossed, touch wood, I'm confident that Air India, which is a first-rate asset, will find a new home very soon thereafter.
Right. And finally, sir, what about plans to open up international travel in India, given the virus situation locally and globally?
Well, first of all, civil aviation comes as one big packet. Domestic civil aviation is almost in India reaching pre-COVID levels because we have a handle on our COVID figures. Our we test more than 1 million people every day. Our positivity rate is only 2%. Our case fatality rate or the mortality rate is 1.2 or 1.3%. We have now reached a figure of about 250,000 passengers a day. We started at 30,000 passengers domestically on 25th May. Our pre-COVID figure is 300 to 350. I'm very confident by the end of this month we should reach 300,000 figure, and within a few weeks thereafter 350,000, which is the pre-COVID figure. Insofar as international traffic is concerned, well, internationally the virus's behavior is fluid, dynamic. We are running bubbles with 23 countries. We are through some arrangements ensuring that our passengers can fly to 100 countries. We give 6 freedom rights to places in Africa and Latin America to which Air India doesn't fly. But we are monitoring the situation very, very carefully. There is in one particular European country, there is a new variant of the mutation of the virus, and we are monitoring that very carefully, and you'll get decision soon on how we are going to react to that. But other than that, I'm confident. But the total opening of civil aviation, I think that process will receive an encouragement and boost when the vaccine rolls out. By information in the public domain says in India we should do that in January. I'm also a member of the group of ministers dealing with health and the coronavirus. And you have the virus out. But you know, in this you have to keep your fingers crossed and be exceptionally careful. Because if there are variations, mutations, then we must be ready with a response. And we are up to it. And I'm sure that going forward with the vaccine being available in most parts of the world, certainly in India, we are hoping, by the way, to vaccinate something like 300 million people between now and July next year, which means 600 million doses. We have a very good vaccine program here, at least 3 manufacturing capacities, including some domestic vaccines. So we are confident.
And we wish you the very best for that, sir. Thank you very much for joining us with your take on these important issues.
Thank you very much. Thank you.